All
Hello,
right.
listeners. Today I have with me Dr. Cecile Andreas. Cecile is a coach, and that's the context where I met Cecile um, at the UBC Continuing Professional Development Program. I believe that's where we'd first met, right? Does that resonate with you, Cecile?
Yeah, I think so, Lawrence, although I think we probably crossed paths about 10,000 times in various shared care project iterations in the decade between 2010 and 2020, I guess.
Yeah, that's possible. That's possible. Yeah, shared care is definitely growing. It's a growing program out of the Doctors of BC where specialists and physicians can connect. And right now, when many family physicians have, especially in urban centers, have left the hospital, shared care is a fantastic connection modality for us to grow community as
Mhm.
while we're trying to improve the health system. So thanks for whatever work you've put into there. And
Yeah.
I, I was wondering if we could start a little bit about you and then
Mhm.
move into some coaching specific questions. What brought you to into medicine in the first place? How did you find your way into becoming a physician, Cecilia?
Um, like many kids of my era, I think there was that sort of thing of, when you do well in high school, like, what are you going to do with your life? And for some reason, I thought I had to do something hard. So, and medicine was at the time the hardest thing I could think of doing. And I was always interested in people. And medicine gave me this permission, I guess, to be with people, regardless of what was happening in their lives. And I think for me, that was the extension of that was family medicine, where that longitudinal relationship really was so meaningful. And I got to do some really interesting work in South Africa in the sort of in the um, in the public service hospitals where you know there was all the political stuff of the 1990s going on, but on a day-to-day basis, I could serve people in a way that I thought had integrity and that was free of racism and all the other things that were going on at the time. And so it medicine for me has really been this wonderful way to connect with people and really just be there in important moments.
Yeah, that it comes off very clear that you're very interested and curious about people, and you're one of the best listeners I've ever met in my life.
Oh, that's sweet. Thank you.
So tell me more about South Africa. I've heard from some of my colleagues that growing up in South Africa is I mean, it's a unique experience to grow up anywhere, but there are some things about the culture and the politics and I think about the culture of South Africa, the shifting, the dynamics in South Africa that are very unique when it comes to healthcare equity and such. What comes to your mind when I bring that up?
Um, so many things. I mean, I was born in the late 60s, so now everybody knows how old I am. And so I got to grow up in that sort of transition time, between um, the height of apartheid oppression and then moving into sort of the liberation of the 90s and one of the greatest statesmen of certainly my time, Nelson Mandela, sort of emerging as the leader we all needed. Um, and I think what that gave me was this willingness to sort of question the dominant narrative for sure. Because even as a teenager, I got into all sorts of trouble because I couldn't understand because it's a very Christian country, or it was in when I was growing up there. And on Sunday there would be this gospel of kindness being preached, and then on Monday the oppression would continue, and I couldn't understand how that worked. And so and then seeing the transformation just sort of reaffirmed this idea that every person counts. And unless it's a very good friend of mine who died a few years ago actually worked in the Canadian prison systems she taught creative writing. And that's a whole story on its own. But one of the things she always said to me was, how we treat the worst of us says the most of who the best of us is. And I still believe that. It's how respectful I am to the person sleeping in a doorway on my way to work on Monday morning. That is the best of me. And it's my willingness to treat that person with the respect that their humanity deserves that actually makes the best of all of us. And I think South Africa was such an important place for me to sort of really question what I believe about equality and what I believe about people, which is that we're all just people. And some people get to live much, much harder lives just because of where they're born, the color of their skin, what they look like, the language they speak, the accent they have. The accident of the family I was born into and somebody 2 doors down who was born into a different family and had a very different reality. All of that is not stuff it's stuff I was given. And sort of to live that life with gratitude and recognition and respect, I think was very important. It was very important. And the other part that I will say is the biggest chip I have is around, I'm a fairly raving feminist in some ways. Like I have a lot of problems with male patriarchal systems and the level of oppression that's often present in them. So, yeah, there's that.
Now, you speak about the compassion that you have for someone who might be considered in the dominant culture's eyes as the worst of us. Mm-hmm. And is that something that willingness to go into that compassionate space, is that something that you just naturally came to you as a child, or is that something that was modeled for you, or well, what helps you to get into that space, or has helped
you? I think I've been very lucky, because when I left medical school, we worked at this provincial hospital in East London, which is a little city in South Africa. And it's called Frere Hospital. And at the time, it was quite this famous hospital that a lot of people would go there and train there and get some really robust skills for rural medicine. And so, so the first thing that happened was I'm bilingual, and in the Western Cape where I grew up, that was fine. And then I ended up in the Eastern Cape, and the majority of people speak Xhosa, which I couldn't speak at all. And so sort of, I had these, they were supposed to be translators, but they were really interpreters and there were these incredible people who would interpret the reality for me of what people were saying. And so that was really very important for me, because I could hear people's beliefs, and it was so easy to sort of start understanding how all these political messaging that, about how different we are is like, we all just want our kids to be safe. We want a safe place to live. We want food on the table, and we want a future for our kids. And it became so obvious to me. And that was where it became more and more clear to me that my work was to actually walk away from everything, because I also grew up in Afrikaans culture in South Africa. English is actually my second language. And so, I grew up in a culture of oppression and racism. And so I started understanding that it was really my work was to do whatever I could to break that cycle. And so, being respectful to every person I meet is still a goal I have every single day. And, it doesn't matter who the person is, because there isn't a single person who doesn't deserve respect and kindness.
there's so much love there. There's so much appreciation, and yeah, the presence that you bring is very unique, Cecile. And is there a practice, a particular practice that 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 has assisted you to cultivate this type of unconditional positive regard for any person you see in front of you? Is there a particular practice?
Asking questions. Like like I think that was, so I will say that the most powerful influence on me as a person has been my children, who grew up in Canada and who grew up in a culture that is actually much kinder than the culture I grew up in. And both of my kids are incredibly kind people. And a lot of that I attribute to just the Canadian school system really taught them the value of equality. And so, they brought that home as well. And so, we were often called out about, like, well, that's a very South African way of thinking about it. Like, get with it, mom. And so they challenged me a lot and helped me grow a lot. And then both of my kids are, like, literally, they will walk up to strangers and just be kind. Like, my daughter is famous for just walking up to a stranger and going, "You look beautiful today." And so it's watching my kids do these, like, little moments of just bringing joy to other people, and sort of thinking, like, wow, I want to be the same caliber of human they are. So they continue to be just this massive influence on me. And then the other thing that coaching gave me is just the willingness to ask people. Like, often it's like the simple question about, like, asking the server at our table how they are back. It's such a rote exchange. "Hi, how are you? My name is so and so, and can I take your order today?" And stopping the conversation, going, "Well, how are you? How's the shift going?" And really just engaging with people from this place of, I actually don't know anything about you. Everything I have is assumption. So let me just ask a question, and then listening.
It's
And
beautiful.
there's just magic.
There's magic. There's a magic in that discovery and that connection. I just happened to be today at, it's actually called the Human Connection Conference. I don't know if you've heard of it.
Oh, that sounds so good.
Yeah, it's the third year of it. There were many public health folks there today. I'm in downtown Vancouver, and one of the examples was exactly what you said. Speak to your server today. They may be going through something very challenging, but they're there putting on a smile for you, and doing their best to with what they have, and staying curious about that can really help people feel seen and heard. I think
Mm-hmm.
that's one of your magic skills, is that you are able to help people feel valued, validated, and seen. And I think that is one of the key skills of a coach, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, 70% of the effect of the in any helping relationship is the relationship itself. Relational wounds are healed in relationship. And so how we show up with our clients is actually, and our patients, is part of the healing. And we forget that when, especially, the more technical our clinical environments are, the more we forget how important the relationship is to the actual outcome. I just finished my master's thesis, and part of I came across this lovely article where they actually just did a review of all the studies done about effective influences on clinical decision making. And there's, like, really good evidence that says that the more stressed we are, the narrower our differential, the quicker our interactions, the quicker we are to prescribe, the more tests we ask for, the more referrals we make. And then burnout on top of that escalates that, so how we feel and our affective environment, our emotional environment, is actually so important to patient outcomes. And we don't credit that enough. And we don't look after ourselves enough so that we're actually open for connection. Because it's in relationships that our patients often start trusting the system and starting the science and, taking our really good advice, but people resist our really good advice because they don't know if we're a trusted source yet. And it's the work of that relationship that really allows healing to happen.
Yeah, I hear so many of my colleagues, family doctors, who are feel quite frustrated with their work right now. They're like, I give my patients amazing advice, all the guidelines, all the evidence-based stuff, and they just don't listen to it. And I'm sitting here pulling out my hair and very frustrated that I can't seem to make a difference.
Mm-hmm.
But what you're speaking to, what you're speaking to, what's coming up for you when
Well, I will say, I see you, I am you. And I mean, I spent so many of my years just frustrated and wanting to pull my hair out because I either complained that I didn't have enough time, enough buy-in, enough, compliance. Isn't that, oh, I hate that word.
Yeah.
But
There's patriarchy in that word.
oh, such a terrible word. And we still use it.
Client, patient.
Exactly. And it's like, oh, but you know, what was really interesting is as I made the transition to coaching full-time from medicine, one of the questions that I started asking people is just, what are you ready to change today? Because I can have all the good ideas in the world, but if the person's not ready to engage with the idea, it doesn't matter. So why am I spending all this energy giving people information about something they're not willing to do? Why don't I just say, you know what, in general, we could pick one of these 3 ways that usually help people control their diabetes, whatever, pick disease of, du jour. Which one do you feel like you have any interest in tackling today? And let's talk about that. What could that look like? And that way I don't have to force anybody to do anything.
Yeah. So that discovery, the evoking of where the will is already going.
Yeah.
You taught me a lot about strengths-based or asset-based approaches when working in coaching, just watching how you work. And that's been transformational for me in how I work with my patients as well. And I've seen more of my work in primary care as a coach, as a partner, rather than a paternalistic prescriber. So thank you for that. How did you make that transition from, let's start with stuff from South Africa to Canada, and then from family physician to coach? Tell us about those transitions.
So I want to start with kicking and screaming. I think that's important to acknowledge. Like, it wasn't always pretty, and it's still happening in some ways. So firstly, between South Africa and Canada, it's just the level of paternalism in practice is astounding. Like it's so much more of a paternalistic approach in South Africa. So that was actually a relief to let go of, like, having to know, having to be in control, having to all the things, and really sort of getting to that place where we started off in a magical place. We were hired by the Northern Medical Unit in Manitoba and worked at one of the last, actually I think it was the last federal hospital in Canada, the Percy Moore Hospital on Peguis Reserve. And we had this incredible experience where we were exposed to First Nations communities and all sorts of other, there were Icelandic Canadians and, all sorts of religious groups around that had all sorts of different belief systems. But at the heart of it, everybody was there. Everybody came together as a community, and when bad things happened, everybody showed up and we all just did things because there were only 700 of us. So, you just do things as a community. So I think that was really a very important experience, for us as a family, but also for me as a person, because of the stories and because of the history of residential schools and the 60s scoop and federal hospitals specifically. It was really hard for people to build trust with us because we were not only, we looked like the people who had done really bad things, and we came from a culture that was really different. And we also came from a very problematic culture. for Indigenous folks. And so, you know, for us to stay, we stayed there for 7 years. We were the longest serving doctors that were there at the time. And for us to stay and to let ourselves learn how to just be in with people and build trust with people. That was really, the thing wasn't how smart you were, it was how willing you were to just show up over and over and over and over. Because that's what people needed of us. Would you show up and will you respect me? And it took a long time, but I think I learned a lot there just about the importance of treating people, you know, because the patient in front of me is the most important person in the world in that moment. And how do I show up to let them know that?
Wow. It doesn't sound easy going into a foreign country, and I don't know much about Manitoba, but I'm guessing the place that you and the family landed were probably, it's probably not the most desirable place to live in Canada. I'm guessing that's why you were recruited to that area to serve. It was likely an underserved community.
Yeah, you know, but the thing is though, I have never lived in a place where like literally we arrived in the middle of a snowstorm because we didn't know what a blizzard was. So that was a problem. Because we'd never seen snow before. So that was also an issue. But you know, so we arrived on the Sunday. By the Monday, people had dropped off little notes at the clinic saying, you know what, here's a winter kit. You put this in the back of your car when you drive. Or people would drop off a thing. And I don't know if you've ever lived on the prairies, but the way people give directions on the prairies makes no sense if you don't live on the prairies, because they literally say, look, we're 6 miles east and 2 miles south. You come over for coffee tomorrow. And I'm like, this seems strangely linear, but that's just how the prairies work. You literally go east 6 miles and then go south 2 miles and they will be there.
No other landmarks. You just have to count your steps.
Exactly. And so like that happened, like people just took us in. You know, and I couldn't imagine starting anywhere else in Canada because people just came and took care of us, and they knew we didn't understand the weather. They knew we didn't know what we were doing on snow and ice. I mean, at one point they convinced us to start playing ice hockey because it's the prairies, people play ice hockey. So we go down to Canadian Tire, as one does. We buy ourselves skates, and Greg and I go out on the ice and we fall ourselves to pieces. We could not figure out how people stay upright. So anyway, so one of our friends decides that this is the night where he's taking Greg to go and play hockey for the first time. And Greg goes and he comes back, he says, you won't believe what I learned. And I'm like, what did you learn? He says, they sharpen skates. Oh. You know, we didn't know anything about anything to do with anything cold. So it was like silly things like that people were just like taking their strides and you know, just like, oh, you didn't realize you had to sharpen these things. Or, you know, our friends who took us cross-country skiing who would like to say like, clearly you have never waxed a ski. You need some help here, you know, and it's like people would show up and just bring us fish, bring us, you know, whatever meat they hunted. It was just this wonderful place. Wow. People just showed up for us in such a good way.
Wow. That's amazing. I think that's why you stayed 7 years. It was the community really wrapped around you.
Yeah.
My folks, my parents, they moved from parts of China to come to Canada looking for a better life. Was your move from South Africa to Canada similar in that respect?
Yeah, we were sort of pulled when our son was born. We sort of started noticing people we knew. They were sort of acquaintances more than friends, but their 21-year-old son was murdered in a carjacking just after my son was born. And there was this pattern of people not close to us, but in our circle, who had lost people due to sort of violent events. And we actually initially came because we thought that we were committed to the country and we wanted to go back, but we wanted to sort of extinguish, we didn't want to have a regret and say like, we never tried it. We wanted to try it and say, no, we choose to come back. And I think the way things happened and unfolded in Manitoba was just so, it was just so loving and kind. And we could see this future for our kids where they would just have safety.
Wow. So it got to a point where South Africa just didn't feel safe for your family.
No.
Yeah, and you were looking for a safer home, and it sounds like you found it. That's
Yeah.
fantastic. And now you're working as a family physician. When do you discover coaching?
So 2014. So I think the other thing that's important is the first year we were in Canada, I actually developed breast cancer, and that that journey and the way I was treated in the healthcare system. It's easy as a physician to have all sorts of opinions about how the healthcare system works. And then I had this experience as a patient where no matter where I went, I was so met by people who just cared about me and our family. And so I think that changed fundamentally what I believe good care is and how I wanted to provide care, because I wanted to be the person who just listened and who was present and who was willing to talk about the things that weren't necessarily medical, but was important. Because that's what people did for me. And then because of that, I also started over-functioning in a lot of clinical environments because I wanted to show up for people. And I wasn't really good at setting boundaries. So by 2012, I got so burnt out. I was like, I don't know that I can keep going. And at that point, I knew somebody who was getting coach training. And I sort of said to her, like, I need help. And she said, okay, let's figure this out. And what we did was to sort of really start unpacking what is it about medicine that I love, and what is it about medicine that is draining, that drains my energy. And as we were going through the process, I got really curious about coaching as an add-on to, what could coaching do as an add-on to clinical practice? And then when I went to Royal Roads, and the very first day, the very first demo, I watched this masterful coach, and I was just, every hair on my body was standing straight up. And I thought, like, I don't know what this is. And I've never seen anybody relate to another person this way. But this is what I want to do with the rest of my life. And it was so clear. And yeah, so it was this 10-year journey of just like learning how to be with people.
I don't know. I don't know why I'm getting emotional hearing you speak about this. It's yeah, you just described a somatic response to witnessing something that you felt like that was like resonating with your core, with your spirit.
Mhm.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I mean, that coach, she's one of my mentors now today, and she's still one of the people. Every time I watch her work, I just see this, like, the way of just being 100% here with someone, and it's so magical.
What's her name?
Oh, Carolyn Conman. So
Carolyn.
Carolyn was actually, she's fascinating. She comes from healthcare as well, and um, she was a dietitian and led a lot of dietetic work in her time, and then transitioned into coaching. But she was one of the first master coaches in the world, but
No,
absolutely influential on my life.
she was a big Carolyn Conlon. I've I've met Anne McNamara, who was
Mhm.
came through your program. You're now one of the trainers or faculty at Royal Roads, the coaching.
Mhm. I'm one of the faculty, yeah.
Yeah, and I don't know. Well, Dr. Sarah Lee is another
Mhm.
one who a more recent graduate who I've met. Are there many physician coaches now in our province? Are there hundreds of them or?
Um, there's more of them than there used to be. I don't know the exact number. I think the Canadian Physician Coaches Network is just over 200 now. I don't know. I don't keep track of stats like that at all. What I know is there are more people now that I can talk coaching with than there used to be.
Mm,
And every class, we usually have one or two physicians, which really is encouraging to me.
mm.
Um, yeah,
And the classes, they're a year long or
7 months. It's seven
uh,
months of training. Um, yeah, and we do sort of a week residency at the beginning and then 7 months of training and then sort of a capstone at the end. And
mm. If someone is interested to train under you at Royal Roads, they would just type in Royal Roads Executive Coaching. Is that right?
yeah, absolutely. And I must clarify, I am not the only faculty member. There's a whole team. Scott
Yeah.
Richardson is our director of education, another one who has influenced my way of being and doing in coaching absolutely dramatically. One of the most tentatively curious humans, Scott. He often will say things like, "Oh, I've heard it said that," and it's so weightless and offering, and it's one of the most beautiful things that I've taken from him.
It's funny. I often get to see you get excited about the way the way people ask questions. And it's a very like I don't know if it's called geeky
It's
or
a niche nerd. I'm a niche nerd now.
it's a niche appreciation. But it's delightful to watch you get excited about that stuff.
Oh yeah, no, I mean like I was actually speaking to a psychotherapist on the weekend who's just done she does a podcast and she just spoke to somebody about the art of not asking questions. Because whoever asks the questions actually holds the power. And so one of the things that I've started thinking and working on is if a coaching relationship is supposed to be a very equal relationship, we're with thought partners. And so if I'm the one always asking the questions and the expectation is the client needs to answer, that's an inherent power dynamic. So what is it that I can do that isn't a question that still facilitates thinking? And
Mm,
so it's been one of the things that I've been trying to think about and work on.
mm.
Um, so yeah.
Some of the things that we've done in our UBC continuing professional development is around paraphrasing or nonverbal um, cues.
Mhm.
I'm wondering what else there might be.
Yeah. I think silence is the hugely undervalued one. Um, and what I've been practicing is just reflection, like literally just the high value ending. Like a lot of people will say they'll throw out these little statements, and then if I just throw out those three little words, a lot of times it will just flow on. And Nancy Klein wrote uh, a few books, but one of them is Time to Think, and she talks about when we listen deeply enough, people's own questions will emerge, and I really believe that. Like there's a moment in a really good coaching conversation where clients start speaking in questions, and that's when I know I'm really like that's the quality of listening where I'm no longer even necessary to the client because they are actually working through their own process. And my work is just to sort of help them hear themselves. And then I don't have to ask any questions because they're doing that themselves. So I'm just the mirror.
Wow. You've facilitated a space where the client can begins to self-coach. It becomes empowered to guide themselves to new ways of thinking. That's fantastic.
Yeah. But you know, it's one of the things that I I so I've often said, and I will say it, I will keep saying it, I think, until I'm dead, is the most undervalued resource in our healthcare system is patients. I mean, every CEO, every senior leader, every person who's ever made difficult change in the world is a patient. That's the reality of human nature. And yet, when people come into our healthcare systems, we treat them often as though they're naive to systems. And if only they would understand our system better, they would learn to fit into it better. Instead of sort of really getting curious about what is it you see and what could we actually consider changing from a different paradigm. And I think that's where it all comes together for me, is there's this level of listening where we actually hear new things about things we think we know. And it's when we do that that the real opportunities to make change emerge.
Yeah. It kind of blows my mind that one of the most powerful questions in health systems quality improvement is what matters to you. And
Mhm.
I often hear you asking that in various coaching contexts. And yeah, I love it. I love it that our friends at the IHI, the Institute of Healthcare Improvement, Maureen Bisognano and Don Berwick, they promote this coaching question, this open-ended "what matters to you" question.
Mhm. Yeah,
Essentially, we're coaching the entire system with this one question.
yeah. The thing that we are not trained to do is to actually listen to the answer. Because it's one thing to ask the question, it's another thing to listen to the answer, and it's a third thing to listen to the answer and suspend judgment. And you know, it's one of the things that I've noticed I do, and I'm sure I'm probably not alone, is that I often will have a preconceived answer to whatever the question is, and then I listen to the answer through my answer. And so, you know, how do I become aware of whatever the answer is that I'm holding? How do I get out of the way of the other person's answer? And how do I really open myself to hear what they're saying, especially when it doesn't agree with what I believe quite strongly? Excuse me.
Wow. Yeah, we're often listening to confirm our bias, eh?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I found that learning about coaching has been like so much of it has been an endeavor around learning about self, about self-awareness. Does that resonate with you?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, totally. It's it's so humbling, you know, because um one of the coaching students a few cohorts ago said to me, the difference between "you're right" and "it's true." And it was like this, like, whoa, say that again. And this person said to me, yeah, when people say "you're right," I'm giving advice. And when people say, "oh, that's true," it's when it's something that really resonates. And it's
Energetic difference there. Yeah.
yeah. And so I think what coaching has been so much of a journey of just humility, because to sort of truly understand that I actually have no answers, that nothing that I so fervently believe about the world needs to be true for anybody else,
Mm.
that they have absolute choice about what they believe, how they see the world, what they choose to do, how they choose to be. And my work is not to fix them or change them. My work is to show up for them and be with them. And I think for me, that was the most important lesson that I needed to learn. because medicine makes us action figures. It's like, hypertension, I have a fix for you. Diabetes, I have a plan for you. We do this sort of action-based exchange all the time. And coaching really sort of said, no, 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 no. You just be.
It sounds so, there's paradox there, that coaching's all about being and showing up and then doing nothing. No,
I don't know how hard you have to sit on your hands sometimes. But like, I sometimes sit metaphorically on my hands so that I won't jump in with a good idea. Because I think that was the thing that I think coaching, when done well, is actually the hardest exercise in self-management that I ever do. The more real the material is, the more lived experience I have in the material, the more likely I am to lose my stance of this person is whole and capable. So it's actually, for me, there are these transcendent moments where I can be really in the moment with the client. And Carolyn talks about, like, we actually don't have questions, we're given questions. And those are those questions, and all of us have them. Like, if you're sitting in a situation, suddenly there's these questions in your mind. And Carolyn, she always says, when you're attuned to the moment, the questions will be there, and you just have to pick a question. And there's no right question, there's just the next question. And that's what makes coaching so hard, because you have to give up on believing you're right, and you have to intentionally do that. And B, according to the competencies, the competency says the client needs to choose what happens in the session. It's the opposite of how it happens in a medical encounter. So in every single choice I make, how do I give the client the choice instead of me actually controlling? And that's hard. And then the third thing is to become really discerning about what's the highest level intervention, interjection that I can make here that has the highest impact with the smallest imprint. Because what I want is to open the person's thinking. I don't want to change their thinking. I want them to actually think about their thinking. I don't want to change their mind. I want them to think about their thinking and get really critical about their inner thoughts. And I think that's what makes coaching so hard, because we're so conditioned to want to change people's minds and have them see it our way and give them good advice and just have them change, because it's simple. It's easy. Just do it the way I did it. But that's not coaching. That's something else. And it works some of the time, but that's not what coaches do.
Wow. The highest impact with the lowest imprint.
Yeah.
Wow. Many have not considered that coaching is a career path. And would you recommend it as a career path?
Well, it depends. I think it depends. So, like, sometimes people look at me and it sounds the center, I say I left family medicine and I became a full-time coach. And it's like, literally, like I said, I left medicine and joined the circus. I think it would have the same level of impact. So I will say a few things. I think a lot of people find a way to integrate both. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I think some people are probably really able to integrate coaching into their clinical practice, and I absolutely admire that. I tend to be somebody who likes a single channel. And you can tell how incredibly passionate I am about the actual practice of coaching. I wrote a whole thesis about, like, competencies, and I'm that kind of nerd. So I just got so consumed by wanting to understand how to do what I do, that and it's so joyful. Like, I can't believe people pay me to do this stuff. Like, I get to listen to brilliant people solve problems right in front of my very eyes. Like, I have so much faith in humanity. Like, because I just watch the magnificence of people all day, every day. So I think someone like me who likes a singular focus, yes, it's a wonderful career. I would not want to do anything else with my life at this point. I will also say I needed a whole life's worth of experience to be ready to be in this place. And so I don't think there's a right way or a wrong way to do it. I think what I would say is the way to improve systems is not to individually make change. It's to collectively have those important conversations where everybody's opinion is valuable. And, I mean, you do a lot of work in quality improvement, and coaching gives us the skills to really have conversations that's elevated above the level of status and hierarchy, where if we convene good conversations, regardless of where you are in the hierarchy, your perspective is valuable and it matters, and it's worthy of initiating change. And that's all that coaching is at the end, is a way to convene egalitarian conversations where we try to diminish power dynamics. And so I think, yeah, you can do it the way I've done it, and some people will, but it's the application day to day that we do everywhere in our lives that really moves things.
Is coaching always healing?
Like anything, you can do harm for sure. And I mean, I think so there's I spend a lot of time thinking about how I am and how I stay fit for purpose. As a coach, I think that's important. So, I do get mentor coaching from time to time where somebody listens to me working and will say, like, here are the habits that I've heard you've recently acquired, these habits. How's that going for you? And how's that align with the competencies you so desperately want to adhere to? So I get some mentor coaching. I regularly get supervision. I meet with someone once a month to talk about the places in my practice where I am struggling to work with specific clients or specific material. And then from time to time, I do engage in therapy as well, because, there's stuff that client work will often bring up some of my own past stories that I need to reckon with. And so I think, there's this movement of peer coaching. And I realize not everybody can have a professional coach. I realize the system doesn't have capacity for that. But I think if we are going to engage in coaching and mentoring, and I make very little distinction between those two, by the way, there is a responsibility on the person in the coach's seat to make sure that they are fit for purpose and that they are willing to get out of the way of the other person. Because if you're there to change the other person, the risks are high of doing damage.
Wow. And when you say doing damage, meaning wasting time or misguiding someone, or just directing someone in a direction that may not actually serve them.
Yeah. I mean, as soon as we're guiding or directing, we're no longer coaching. And there's nothing wrong with those modalities as long as we know what we're doing. And I just want to say, how I differentiate between mentoring and coaching is actually the European Mentor Coaching Council has one single set of competencies for both. And they say that the core difference is that mentors frame questions from their experience and coaches frame questions from their curiosity. And so for them, it's really a stance and where the questions form from, rather than the how you practice the actual practice. And so that's one of the things that often mentors sort of say to me, oh, no, I give advice because I'm a mentor. And I'm like, well, yeah, you can. Or you can say, here's what I did and here's what 3 other people did. And I wonder, what of that is useful to you? Because again, it's about impact, not imprint. Like, I'm not here to tell you to do it my way. I'm here to offer you what I understand from my lived experience. Can I make the offer with open hands? If I can't make the offer with open hands, I'm not ready to share it yet.
Tell me more about the offer with open hands.
So this is how I look at advice. If if I am holding the advice sort of pinched in my hand and I'm giving it to you, and when you take it, you have to wrestle me for it. I am too attached to the advice. If I can just hold out my hand, put it on the palm of my hand, what you do with it, I don't care. I am ready to offer you that advice, because in the power dynamic, you have to, if I am the coach and you are the client, in the power dynamic, the only way I can offer advice without expectation is to make the power dynamic such that you can refuse the offer. And that's what I want to make possible, is that you can pick yes or no, because the person who has power over yes often. Like, the other person wants to be a good client, so they'll likely say yes. So how do I offer it so you actually have the opportunity to say no? That's the hard part.
Wow. So much of excellence in coaching is around, would you call it suspending the self or suppressing the self? How do you phrase it?
It's no, it's actually not suppressing the self at all. It's actually like, I am never as aware of what's going on in me as when I'm with a client, because that's part of what happens between us, is the sensed, unspoken, somatic reaction that I have to the session. And that's important data. And sometimes I will use that, like, wow, when you said that, this is how it felt for me, like that kind of stuff. So I need to be aware of myself, and I need to be aware of the client, and I need to be aware of the space between us, because all the change happens between us. And so it's not about suppressing myself, but it's being aware and being choiceful about how I show up. And I don't think it's any different in our physician lives. But I think as a physician, I was running so fast, I didn't have time to actually recognize what was going on in me. And now I have that time.
You have that time to be much more intentional and respectful with your presence, and to recognize the capability of the person you're working with. Yeah. I've taken some of those lessons and tried to apply them into my work in the clinic, and it's actually been freeing. It's been freeing of me and my sense of a need to be responsible for outcomes all the time, even when I don't have sphere of influence on the outcomes. So that has been really helpful, kind of understanding more about my boundaries.
So how does that play out for you, Lawrence? We've talked a lot about how it plays out for me, but
yeah, I think it plays out in that I also burnt out very quickly within the first 5 years of my career. I'm now in my 14th year in British Columbia as a family physician, and so with some of this understanding of a more empowering model of being helpful with my patients, it's resulted in me stretching myself less, but I feel like I'm being as effective or more effective than before with my old approach of trying to think about all the different solutions that I could offer someone and trying to actualize it for them, sometimes putting more effort into a solution than the person in front of me, because I'm thinking that they are not capable to actualize it. Therefore, I have to try to build all the bridges and put all the different things in place in order to assist them. So yeah, it's resulted in a more, I think, meeting people where they're at and moving and being more curious. with
Mhm.
my patients and trying to see where they're willing to go with
Mhm.
whatever challenges that they're facing. And so it's been a liberating thing, a freeing thing, and potentially more effective and efficient thing. And I recognize that I'm not coaching my patients, and my
Mhm.
patients will often ask me, just tell me what to do. and
Mhm. Yeah.
I'll tell them what I think is the best. So yeah, it's
Mhm.
an adaptive thing, but the coaching skills definitely help quite a lot.
Mhm. Yeah.
I- I'm seeing a lot of value in coaching for physicians, any physicians who are struggling with their own work-life balance, maybe, or physicians who are interested in doing any type of leadership or quality improvement. I'm seeing a lot of value in coaching, um,
Mhm.
especially in the context where you're often choosing between options that are none of them are ideal. They're just the best of what can be done now.
Mhm.
I'm envisioning a department head of surgery per se, and having to choose between um, a particular option that causes the surgical team uh, a lot of distress, and another one that causes them a little bit less distress, and then having to negotiate those challenging conversations. And I think that coaching would really help. Do you find that you get do you get a lot of clients who are physicians, who are interested in coaching for physicians? Do you find that?
Well, my full-time job is coaching physicians, healthcare leaders, and the healthcare teams. So I have a few clients outside of those descriptors, but all my work is in those domains.
Oh yeah.
Um, and I think it ranges. What I really enjoy is that some people are truly burnt out and trying desperately to find a way to survive in practice. And then it goes all the way to the people who are in senior leadership positions and wanting to do strategic work. They're needing a place where they can, in confidence, think through the sort of options and building that future. And so it really is sort of this, because the client is in charge of the agenda, so it's such a flexible approach to being helped, and being supported. I actually resist the word helping, because I think that in and of itself is a little, I think it's relational, and it's actually partnership, um, because we're in partnership to uncover what there is to know. And in the master coaching competencies, there used to be this beautiful frame that says the coach asks questions that neither the coach nor the client has the answer to. And that's where new learning lies. When we're in a conversation and we're asking questions that there are no answers that are known yet. And we're just here to uncover them. And so I think, because it's such a flexible modality, whether you're burnt out or you're looking to build, there's a coach that could support that thinking in a way that would work for you.
Wow. It seems that coaching, so much of coaching, like I see, and I'm sure you see it too, there's so much of coaching is around, there's a spiritual aspect to coaching. I'll just say it,
Yeah.
there's a spiritual aspect. And what I mean by that is that there are so many values that are tied to benevolence and um, things like compassion, things like self-compassion, things like um, self-determination, um, just seeing others as capable, and positive regard, um, respect. Do you? I can tell that for you, coaching is a very disciplined practice, something that is very respectful for to all parties. Can you speak a little bit to the origins of this coaching culture that you are embodying? It, is,
Yeah.
is that unique to you? Is this something that you witness frequently in your coaching master classes?
I think there's a general, so I think, certainly when we have sort of faculty meetings at Royal Roads, there is this gestalt that we do have this fundamental belief in people's capacity. So I think part of it was just the training in the school that I went to that has such a deep regard for, clients and respect for our clients. So I think there's that. And then the other piece that I think has been absolutely vital is my medical training and the ethical training that we get as physicians around boundaries, around respect, and what engagement really means. And I think there were, as my own philosophical sort of frame and my own ethical framework around how I work as a coach has evolved, a lot of the medical ethics that sort of I was swimming in for so long has sort of transposed. So I sometimes feel like, as physicians, we have a different relationship with responsibility and ethical responsibility than a lot of other people, because just we have so much power in people's lives. And so I think that has also really, I think medicine is such a beautiful gift in that it gives us this huge permission to be with people, but it also gives us this giant responsibility to be with people in a good way. And I think that part of it really has come through in how I view coaching. And when I'm teaching, I hope that philosophy comes across. And I think every person, and I think this will resonate with every physician out there, we all have a philosophical frame and an ethical frame that we suspend our practice in. And it's really being clear and being conscious about what is the philosophical frame and what is my ethical frame. And, being willing to then attend and attune to that and suspending our practice in that. That's how we stay safe, no matter what we do.
Thank you. So every coach has an opportunity to develop their own ethical and philosophical framework. But there are other competencies that also guide. Yeah.
And every coaching organization has its own ethical statement, like the International Coach Federation, the European Mentor Coaching Council. They each have their own ethical frame that when I'm accredited, I sign on to that ethical framework. But the thing is, so do we as physicians. When you get when you get your license from the college, we're signing on to a ethical framework. The question is, how aware are we of that framework? How willing are we to practice within that framework? And so, that I think has been, my thinking about that was really informed by that expectation from the college to actually practice in an ethical way. And how do I then do that in another profession in the same way?
I only have a few more questions, and then I'll allow you to share whatever else you'd like to share. Does the coaching thing ever cause issues in your relationship with your husband?
Well, so early on it did, because
you're practicing on him.
Well, and it turns out with my husband, I cannot be impartial because I want a specific outcome. So it's been lovely to see that he will sometimes come to me and say, hey, can we think through something? Or I will go to him now and say, I need to think through something. And he's actually become a lot more, he's developed his own coaching skills through, a lot of his own learning and stuff. And so it's been really nice for the two of us to have a really good thinking partner in the house. In parenting, it's also with the kids, I have to be really careful because I drop into the coach mode so quickly. And so stealth coaching my children has been, something I've had to work on. And sort of, I'm at the point where I'm conscious enough most of the time to sort of say, okay, do you want me to coach you or do you want me to be your mother? Like, pick one. Can't be both. You got to be one or the other. I just need to know what the hat is that I'm wearing. Yeah, and it's so it can the biggest temptation, I guess, is to coach people without their consent. Because I have the skill, I can ask really good questions. But if somebody hasn't consented, it's an invasion of their privacy. And so if I am going to drop into using my coaching skills, I need to ask permission. Like, is this something you would like me to coach you about? Okay, like what's the container we need to create for that to happen? And then we can drop into the conversation.
And that's kind of what stealth coaching is. It's coaching without asking permission. Okay. And what might the risk be of stealth coaching your own child? Is it because you have other relationships? Yeah, is that?
And I mean, I'm attached. I'm 100% attached to a good outcome. And there's
Good
no
outcome is
way.
defined by you.
Exactly. And I mean,
Yeah.
like, when in Dare to Lead, we used to talk about horizon conflict. My kids want to talk about, like, I want to go to this party. And I'm like, but in 20 years from now, you're taking drugs and you're still in my basement. The horizon conflict is just dramatic. So it's been like, I am not the best coach for my kids. So if they need coaching, I have lots of friends who are great coaches who can coach them. My role with my kids is to be their parent. And that means that I am on their side. I'm still curious, but I just don't have the necessary level of detachment that makes me a really great coach for them. Yeah, I can coach them through the next decision, but if they're really wrestling something to the ground and it's a lot of like values-based, big picture thinking, they need to be with somebody who can get completely out of the way. And I'm not that person, and that's okay. Because my job is to love them and to be there and to be an unconditional supporter of them and the person they were meant to be. And, that sounds a lot like coaching, but it's different.
If someone would like to get in contact with you to learn more about your coaching services, how do they contact you?
I have a website. It's Crux, CRUX coaching and .ca. And then also people are welcome to just email me. A cursory internet search will throw up my email address.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cruxcoaching.ca. Yeah.
Yeah.
I like quotes. And a quote that comes to mind for me is the one from Dr. Maya Angelou, the one that we do the best we can till we know better, and when we know better, we do better. I really like that one because it has almost like self-compassion baked into it, that we forgive ourselves maybe for when we do something that we're not super proud of, but then we recognize that we did the best that we could at the time. Is there a particular quote that comes up when you do coaching training that you like to call on, or that inspires you or your students?
Well, the quote about coaching that I always go back to is Ram Dass once said, we're all just walking each other home. And I really love that. I think that's really how I view the coaching relationship, is we're just walking each other home. And there's a beautiful quote from Chris Peterson, who was a professor at Stanford, I think, and he taught positive psychology. And it's one of the most powerful questions that I come back to in my own life, which is, when we know what we know, why do we live the way we live?
When we know what we know, why do we live the way we live? it kind of propels me to make changes. Yeah.
Yeah,
To do
it's
better.
such a provocative question.
Mhm.
And so that's probably the question I will, in my own life, when I need to figure something out. It's always that question that comes up for me. It's when I know what I know, why do I live the way I live?
Thank you, Cecile. Thank you for spending this time with me and for sharing so much of yourself with the listeners and with everybody else. I want to give a shout out to your partner, Greg, who's I call him a friend, and he and I are in coaching learning circles together. So is there
Yeah.
anything
Well,
else?
thanks for having me.
Oh, you're welcome. Is there anything else you'd like to share with the audience today?
I always worry when I talk about coaching in this way that I make it sound easy or trite or easily accessible or easily applicable. And I just want people to know it's hard and it's complicated. And every single person out there, whatever you're doing today, it's enough.
Hmm. Yeah. Thank you, Cecile. I'm going to stop the recording now.